Welcome to the Social Lights podcast with Kate Vandervoort, where I interview changemakers and innovators on how they connect with their tribe on social media. Brought to you by Social Mediology. Welcome everyone to the Social Lights podcast. I have with me today Warren Carlisle, who is founder and CEO of Octonation, the largest octopus fan club, a not-for-profit organisation that inspires conservation of the ocean by teaching the world about octopuses, not octopi. He is also the co-founder of the Community Leaders Association and is a community building strategist who works with purpose-driven brands and influencers to build highly engaged online communities. Warren and his communities have been featured and gotten the attention of celebrities and global organisations such as Michael B. Jordan, Ellen DeGeneres, Joe Rogan, Facebook HQ, and more. Warren believes online communities are the lifeblood of brand relevancy in today's crowded digital marketplace, and especially now given the global pandemic. Welcome, Warren.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I am so excited to interview you. Warren and I met because we're both learning mentors with Facebook now on the community certification program. And I have been fascinated with Warren's story about, growing and managing the largest octopus fan club, as well as the amazing work that you do in your agency. So, Warren, tell us, what is it that lights you up most? What gets you out of bed in the morning or keeps you up late at night, now that I know you're a night owl?
I would say what lights me up the most is seeing people able to live their dreams, live their passion, create communities around the things that they love, because that's what I was able to do. And so, for me, it's the largest octopus fan club. But for those of you who are listening, think about what that is for you. And to me, when I see people winning at the thing that they're truly passionate about, I just think the world becomes a better place because they're talking about something, it lights them up. Their whole demeanor changes. And if they can figure out a way to make that sustainable, that's even better. And so I would say that's what lights me up the most.
Yeah.
Which is why we're both Facebook mentors, right? Which is why we signed up for that, because I think we feel the same way. Is when people finally get it, we're super excited for them.
Yeah, and when you can activate that in community, then that happens en masse, not just at that individual level. So tell us a bit, because you've got a really interesting journey to how you came to where you are. Tell us a bit about your journey up to launching Octonation and your agency.
Yeah, so I'll do a shorter version of it. But in 2011, unfortunately, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she ended up passing away that same year that she was diagnosed. And I remember I didn't know what to do with myself in the moment. I was very scattered. I was 22 years old, and I remember going to a bookstore and just I didn't want to be home. And so I went to the bookstore and I was just walking around and I was what am I even going to do with my life? And I was looking at all these books and I was looking at all these directions that I could go. And I wasn't really happy with what I was doing at the moment. And I remember walking down the magazine aisle and seeing all these fashion magazines. And I was I don't want to be here anymore. Where do I want to go? And so I walked down the magazine aisle and I saw all these fashion magazines and I was I want to move to New York. I was living in Texas at the time. I was I want to move to New York. And so I was how would I even do that? I don't know anybody there. And so I laid out all of these fashion magazines and I had it in my head that I would get an internship and I would be an intern for a celebrity fashion photographer. And I would direct message them on Instagram and I would just, they would say yes because of all the things that I could potentially do for them. And so I sat there and I wrote down a list of all the things that I could potentially do for them as an intern. I was I can help you build your brand alongside of the talent that you work with. I can make sure that you get behind the scenes shots. I could make sure, and I just wrote down this list. And then I started reaching out to people that I found. And in about 2 months, I was on a plane to New York. I got an internship with a celebrity fashion photographer. And after working with him for 6 months, I became his studio manager. So I started managing all of his strategic partnerships with global fashion brands like GQ, Todd Snyder, Uniqlo, Mont Blanc, Calvin Klein. The list goes on, and just worked with him, and was in the room with like, when they were making marketing decisions for these brands and how they were working with influencers. And after a while, that's when I said, well, if all these brands are doing it, there's really no barrier to entry with community. They're all using free platforms and they're all just doing strategic collaborations with celebrities, but I can do that with something that I love, which was, I've always been obsessed with the octopus, and we can tell that story later. But I thought, the octopus needs a bigger platform. And I had read the book, The Soul of an Octopus by Cy Montgomery, and she talks about how the octopus was a largely demonized animal. And I read that and I thought, no, they just need a better PR agent. And then I had this light bulb moment where I was just like, I could build the largest octopus fan club. And so I started building it on the side when I was working in New York with Chung Kai, and it ended up taking off really quickly because of all the stuff that I had learned, all these strategic partnerships, collaborations. I just did the same thing, but I was representing the octopus. And so I did, interviews with New York Times bestselling authors, with professors, with underwater photographers, I just made this whole entire strategy, and it started taking off. Enough so that I ended up leaving my job in New York for it.
It's such a great story. I've got so many questions about that. So if we go back to, firstly, how exciting it must have been to be in fashion as social media was really evolving, because it's such a natural platform for fashion, communities to be.
Especially Instagram. Instagram was probably the biggest platform that was driving fashion at the time. And companies were growing increasingly aware that people weren't really relating to celebrities as much as they were. They were growing increasingly irrelevant because they just didn't have enough face time with the consumer, with their fans. Whereas influencers or YouTubers were going live every single day. They were, demonstrating product. They were demonstrating clothes, and you felt like you had a better connection with them than you did, a celebrity. And so brands shifted their focus and started looking for influencers, for people that had, sizable followings, and doing strategic collaborations with them. And I was there during that time. And I think that's really what inspired me. I was like, if they're choosing, if these people are the future, community leaders are just everyday people like you and me, then I need to jump in on this, because they're not doing anything that I can't do. And for those of you listening, they're not doing anything that you can't do. So, it's possible for everyone.
Yeah, it's a great distinction, and we're going to go deeper into that. But my other reflection on what you were just saying, in your journey is, I've been banging on about community and relationship on social media for 12 years since I started my company. But what I've found is that a lot of the industry didn't really embrace the concept of community, or even truly understand that concept of community, until almost quite recently. So at what point in your career did you start acknowledging the difference between just social media platforms and community?
That's a really good question. I have to think on that one. I would say that I have never been a person to evangelize a CEO or a brand to believe what I'm telling them. I've never been in that position. I was just like, I will just show you how much you're missing out with data, or however you want to say it, with facts. And I think that the fact of the matter was there was an overwhelming case for the affinity that people had for community leaders. And so I don't think I called them community leaders at the time, or like anything like that. They always called them influencers. But I think it was just this natural progression where it just became overwhelming. I work with people now, like we have a store here in the States called Hobby Lobby or Michael's, and it's a craft store. And they were only able to really get 600 people to show up on a live. And they worked with one of my clients, Damon Oates, and they crashed all of their systems because there were so many people trying to sign up to get on live with them. And again, it's just one of those cases where it's overwhelming. I mean, that the affinity that people have for these community leaders, where you just have to put a brand or put somebody in a situation where they just, community leader knocks it out of the park, and that in and of itself changes their mind. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I've always just been able, like, okay, well, let's do a test with something, let's work with so-and-so. Or I would go out, because this was my job when I worked with Chung Kai and worked with some brands, is I had to go and out locate influencers. And I would always choose the ones that I just knew they were going to knock it out of the park, and really convince the brand where we need to double down on this, because, we didn't get this much return on investment when we worked with, insert name of celebrity. We really need to grow this division out. So I think I just, I was in the space where I could actually, make these decisions. And I was always the person around the table of marketing people talking, that I would wait till everybody was finished talking. And I'd be like, I really love what everybody had to say, but let's think about all these things, And so, yeah, that's just kind of where I was.
Yeah, interesting. And I think community can mean different things to different people too. But I know that for a lot of the people listening, they have an amazing idea or an amazing startup or an amazing concept, and they kind of accidentally amass a tribe or a community around them, and are then scrambling to figure out what to do with that. And it sounds like that's a lot of the work that you do as well. But tell me, let's go into that, why you started Octonation and what your vision is for Octonation.
So I started Octonation, again, after I read the book, The Soul of an Octopus by Cy Montgomery. And just to expand on that first 3 pages, which just completely, I had wondered, I was 7 years old when I saw an octopus for the first time. I was at a school field trip, and I was at the end of the line because I was always kind of like, I was a misbehavior. And for good reason. So we were supposed to be walking single file, not touching anything, and just walking and looking at the animals. And because I was on the end, and because they didn't stop where I wanted to stop, I just dipped out off of the line. And I was like, bye, everybody. And so I went my own way, and I found myself in front of this octopus exhibit, and I was looking up at it, and I was like, that thing has got to be an alien. I was like, it's just so cool. And it was like, it was swirling its arms around. And I was just like, it's an incredible animal. And so I went to the library, and there weren't any resources on the octopus. And I was like, what is up? Like, there's resources on turtles, on all these other animals. Why aren't there any books for octopus? And it wasn't until like way later that I read that book, and I thought, oh, they've been highly misrepresented, highly mischaracterized, demonized in Hollywood films for the past 100 years. And I thought, it's so crazy to me, because there's over 300 species. They all have unique superpowers depending on where they live in the ocean. And I was like, read Cy Montgomery's book, and I thought, nobody has thought to storytell about how magnificent, ancient, incredible these creatures are. And I was like, I guess I'll be the person that does that. And so when I was working in New York, I just went to the drawing board like I would if I was working with a brand or an influencer. And I said, okay, if this is my storyline, octopuses are the superheroes of the sea, then who do I need to strategically collaborate with that caters to an audience that has an affinity for wildlife or for the ocean, that could help me get that message out in a bigger way to grow this community of people? So I immediately started thinking about, who out there is talking about the octopus. And so I looked at what brands were talking about the octopus, what professors, what magazines, what journalists, I did like this huge analysis of the market. And I was like, yep, nothing exists like this. And so I was like, okay, how can I feature them? Or how can I work with these people and create these really fun campaigns? Like, one of our campaigns is called Interview with an Octopus, where we go to aquariums all over the world, and we interview the cephalopod keeper or the octopus keeper, and we ask them questions on Facebook Live or Instagram Live. And it's a great opportunity for us to connect with somebody who's really knowledgeable. They in turn market Octonation as the largest octopus fan club. And so we grow our authority in the market as somebody who's creating these really valuable and insightful, lessons around the octopus. And that's just one of 30 different campaigns, that I was thinking about or launching. And so that's just how my brain has worked ever since I started. It was just, how do we inspire wonder of the ocean by teaching the world about octopuses? Lots of kids are apathetic about the ocean because they don't live close to it. And so I thought, how can we bring the octopus to social media in a way that inspires kids and adults to look towards the ocean as something that deserves to be protected? And I thought we can do this in a really fun and sustainable way by just educating about how cool they are. And so I just dreamed up campaigns that would achieve that result. And I've been doing that ever since.
And when that community started to grow following Octonation, what are some of the things that happen in the community around people connecting with each other? Do they build relationship and have dialogue, and has the community kind of taken on its own life?
So if you one of our questions, if you join the group, is how did you hear about Octonation? And it used to be where it was you told me about it, or you were in an Uber with me and you told me about it. And now I was at a coffee shop and I have an octopus tattoo and somebody told me to follow the group. I heard you on NPR. It's just all of these stories about people that have connected with somebody who shares their love and fascination for the creature. And because we've gotten to the point where we've been featured so many different places, now it's just gotten to this point where it's just taken off. But there's just so many different things. People that have octopus tattoos, underwater photographers or videographers, amateur or pro in the group that are sharing different ways to take photos of them, ethical ways. And there's just so many different interactions that happen. One of my favorite interactions that happened was I have an admin of the group, and somebody posted in the group that it was their bucket list to meet an octopus in person, and that they had stage 4 cancer. And my admin was like, we live in the same city. And I was like, okay. And she was just like, I'm going to reach out to him, because she has taken care of octopuses for 13 years. And she actually had one in her living room. And so she picked him up from chemo treatment one day after having a conversation, with him, and introduced him. And I sent her a t-shirt for him and just created this experience for him. And 2 or 3 months later, he ended up passing away. So he succumbed to cancer. And I'd like to think that we created his bucket list item. And it's just things that you don't know are going to happen in your community. There's all these moments that I wasn't planning for that. I didn't know that this was ever going to be a thing, but it just happens. And there's so many cool stories like that have happened for the past 5 years in Octonation, where I could probably write a book now. There's just so many cool, touching stories.
And I think that's the beauty of community, is when it takes on a life of its own, and those stories that come out that you could never have controlled, you could never have manufactured. And, as marketers, we're often looking for how do we manufacture those moments. But true community for me is always when those moments just come organically.
For sure.
And so I'm really interested. I know, well, actually, I'll ask you this first. So what came first, the agency where you do this with other brands and community leaders, or Octonation? Which came first out of those two?
So after I left New York, I didn't go full time into into the nonprofit. I actually didn't go full time, and I'm actually not still full time into the nonprofit. I still, reinvest all of the money that I get into hiring science writers and things like that. When I left New York, I started at a consulting agency where I would work with influencers to really make sure that brands were giving them what they were worth, because I found that brands were really trying to take advantage and exploit a lot of the influencers that I was working with, because they thought, oh, well, they don't know any better. And so I was like, well, they know better if I'm working with them. So I was kind of like a bulldog for these influencers, being like, no, like the numbers, like you obviously don't understand numbers. So let me break down what their engagement rate is. Let me break down what they typically convert at, and let me break down what you think that you're giving them, and that, you know. And after that, like I just would constantly raise the rates of what influencers were getting. And then I started realizing that I didn't really want to work in the fashion space anymore. I would rather work with purpose driven. And that's like kind of what you read in my intro. I am more interested in working with people that are capable of having these highly intellectual, nuanced conversations that don't understand how to build a platform, but their voices need to be heard. Those people are more interesting to me than people who are trying to sell a cami or, you know, some board shorts that have literally no really ethical or moral compass behind them. They're just really good looking or attractive people. Like I left that world a long time ago, and not saying that you can't have both, somebody with a moral compass and who has an amazing brand. But who really interested me were just these community leaders that were like almost solving racial inequities, that were, you know, passing legislation, that were doing really important work, and they didn't understand marketing. And so I thought, I can come in and I can teach you how to get your message out by strategically collaborating with organizations, brands, being an ambassador for certain brands. And a lot of these thought leaders that have something really amazing to say, they're not typically represented, and they don't know that they need representation. And so I typically pick and choose for people, like people that I'm like, okay, I want to advance their voice into the market. And so I'm always finding talent that I'm just like, ooh, I really want to get your message out. And so I've kind of balanced both Octonation and that until just recently, when I launched the Community Leaders Association, because I love Facebook and I love working with Facebook. But I saw an opportunity for there to be higher level training, and wanted to facilitate that higher level training with community leaders that were ready for more faster. And so that's why I created the Community Leaders Association, was to facilitate those conversations at a high level and to train at a high level. So.
Excellent. So interesting how all those things have woven together for you.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I've loved when we've been in our learning cohort rooms is hearing some of your strategies and your framework. So talk to me about your 7 C's of building a fanatical community. I know it's something that our readers will, our listeners will certainly value.
Yes. So I've developed this framework after working with hundreds, if not thousands of people and community leaders on what it takes to build a fanatical community. And I've boiled it down to these 7 C's of building a fanatical community. And the first one is clarity. So you can't really go anywhere if you're not clear about what the community is. And so I always say it needs a very clearly defined who and what. And the more vague those two things are, the more you have the potential to alienate people within your community. And so to give you an example, if you're a woman who wants to help somebody who wants to help other people who have chronic pain, if you create a community of people that suffer chronic pain, then what happens is in the community, you're going to have people that have lupus, you're going to have people that have cancer, you're going to have people that have all these illnesses, and they're going to start not being able to relate to one another, or saying my illness is worse than your illness. And you never wanted to get into a situation where you've developed a community where you're facilitating people to have that conversation. So I always say, if specialize, if you want to help women who suffer chronic debilitating migraine, and that's it, then there's plenty of space in that space for you to create a community around that. And that's like an example of somebody that I helped narrow that focus down. She has a community for just women who suffer chronic debilitating migraine. So that's clarity. Then you move on to core values, and core values are going to be kind of like the brand identity, like your collective identity. So what are things that you like, fundamental core values that your community has? because if you don't really have those down, you're going to manifest people that don't really understand why they're in this community or really what they're bound by, like what aspirational values should they all share. And so you'll get trolls, in your comment section. But if they know that these are the rules, these are the values, then you can always point back to this is what you agreed upon when we came in this group. So with Octonation, we don't show the mistreatment of animals. We don't show massive amounts of pollution. We don't show pictures of pollution. We don't Aquarius shame. So we're never going to say drain the tanks, because we believe Aquarius are on the front line of ocean conservation on a daily basis. So there's all these values and beliefs that we have that you have to make sure that you're clear, or you're going to have people coming in and fighting. So that's core values.
And it's interesting how when you're super clear on those core values, it actually really contributes to the moderation job. And people self-select a lot of the time and opt out because they feel like it's not a place for them if you're really clear.
And you want to constantly reaffirm your values in the group. I always say, if you decline a post, or if you don't allow something to happen, or a conversation's going crazy, you can't just delete posts or comments without reaffirming, hey, this is why this is not okay. Because actually here we don't, if there's a photo of a man holding his daughter and they're looking at a dolphin, or they're looking at an octopus, and you say something along the lines of, oh, it's a shame that creature's, in captivity, like it's in a jail cell and things like that. That's not the intention that this person had when they posted this photo in this community. It's not a place for you to intention hijack and build this narrative that doesn't exist, that does nothing for the morale of this group, and it's just completely short-sighted, and we just don't allow that here. And so your other group members need to see evidence of, hey, this isn't cool, and you need to give you should give context to that.
And do you do that publicly, or do you do that privately?
So it depends. So it depends on the infraction, but if I feel like it's a place to teach, or if I feel like this person just doesn't belong, I typically have a one strike you're out rule. I mean, honestly, with an Octonation, because we have so many different members where I'm just I'm like, I don't know if you can be saved. You said something pretty awful.
My tolerance levels have gone from 100 to 0 in the last 5 years.
If you're highly critical, if you say wow, this tattoo is hideous, you should be ashamed of yourselves or something, you're gone. You can do that in your personal time to your friends, but not here. This is not your space.
I used to always be very, very tolerant, and, would tell clients, you can't just block or get rid of people. You need to engage, and you need to, my tolerance levels are so much less than they used to be.
Yeah, because
and I think there's so much more education now around trolling and abuse on social media, and we need to have a zero tolerance for it.
And not everybody is a fit, and people are trying to educate people to be a fit for their community, and sometimes they're just really not a fit, and you have to understand not everybody belongs in your community, and it's not for you to constantly have to educate. Sometimes it's just nope, you didn't pass the vibe check, as they would say. So that's core values, and then after that you have content. So content is, how are you deserving of your community's attention on a daily basis? What campaigns have you created, or content campaigns have you created, that you can genuinely say, when I post this, I genuinely feel like this is worth somebody, during their lunch break or wherever they're out in the wild, this is deserving of somebody's attention. And if you can't say without a doubt, yes, or this is just a filler post, or this is just a check on the marketing checklist. If you can't genuinely say, this is deserving of someone's attention, you need to go back to the drawing board with, entertaining, educational content. And so I always say that the reason content is the third C is because your content needs to show evidence of your core values, one, and it needs to serve to drive marketplace clarity, your first C. And so you can't really jump to creating content if there's no clarity, and you never want to, you always want to infuse your core values, or else to me, I feel like you're diluting what could be a very strong brand identity, right? And so those first three C's are probably the most important, and that's foundational. And so then I get over to the fourth one, which is collaboration. And this is my zone of genius. This is my favorite part. This is why I created that consulting, because I love looking at a community leader and saying, these are all these brands, very similar to like what I did with Octonation, that are talking about something, or they would be really interested in featuring you as an ambassador because you would provide value to their community in a way that they can't, because you're such a professional at this. Like, you're so an expert at talking about this subject. And so I love lining up opportunities for community influencers with like different brands, organizations. To give you an example, with that woman that helps women who suffer chronic debilitating migraine, even before she had a follower in her Facebook group, I had already connected with her with like the National Headache Foundation, the Association of Migraine Disorders, like all these organizations. And she was like, I don't have any followers yet. I'm like, you don't need followers. And I was like, you're a representation of a mother who has two kids that also unfortunately have chronic debilitating migraine. And you're a PhD, you're the perfect ambassador to go into these organizations to speak on migraine. You don't need a community for that. And I think that's a good lesson for everybody here, is they think, when I get 1,000 followers, or when I get 200 people in my group, or maybe, that I'm deserving of reaching out to collaborate. It's like, if you're an expert for any length of time, like you mentioned, for 15 years or so you've been doing this, you deserve to be at the highest level right now. So what brands are doing that? And like you had mentioned that you're speaking at like Agora Pulse, like, so what other brands are next? You know what I mean? At the highest level, they need your expertise. And so collaboration is just one of those C's where it just lights me up, because I think it's because like that bulldog for me that like worked with influencers comes out, and I'm just like, ooh, like, who can we put you with? So, and
I love that, because it's actually a piece that, particularly with people that I work with who tend to be 40 plus, I tend to work with a bit of an older demographic who are not digital natives, and a lot of this does not come naturally to them. And collaboration is such a great way to gently kind of step out with support around you, rather than being the only voice about whatever it is that people are representing.
And the collaboration is the fourth C. So I always tell people, so remember the other C's, when you collaborate with someone, you have to make sure that they share your core values, that they're creating content that makes sense for your brand as well. And that that it makes sense. Like, the collaboration has to make, to me, I feel like, you don't want it to backfire on you, because
we've all seen terrible collaborations in the media where you just go, oh, why did they do that?
You have to be very aware of that brand's track record. And if they have a bad track record, or they're representing somebody else who's problematic, then maybe you should say no. And there's been plenty of organizations that have wanted to collaborate with me, that I look at their lineup of people that they've worked with in the past, and I go, like, no way. And there's like no way I would ever. And it's weird, because here I am in this position of like, these organizations are like 30 times, 50 times bigger than what I'm doing. And yet you still have to be like, does this make sense for my brand? Does this brand share my core values? And if the answer is no, then your values make the decision for you, not your ego. And so after collaboration, then you have connection. And connection is, how are you making your community members feel seen? It's really important that if you have a community, that you're creating campaigns that allow for your members to feel seen and heard. And so what that looks like is, me featuring people that, have bought from Octonation. So like, say they have an Octonation t-shirt. Say it's spotlighting underwater photographers that have shot a photo of an octopus or something. Maybe doing a spotlight on photographers, talking about their story. Because a lot of these people, they've never been featured, they've never been profiled. And to this day, the people that we feature on Octonation say, it changed my life. I didn't think that I, was worthy of being featured. And all of a sudden now I'm a sponsored photographer, and I'm an artist that just started their Etsy store, and because you featured me, you were able to jumpstart my business, and now I'm an artist full time. Like, there's just so many stories of people that we've put on the map, that they'll never going to forget their affinity to our community, and it's just so good for the morale overall for our community. So when I look at working with a community leader, I go, when we get to the connection part, I go, what opportunities are there for you to make your community members feel seen? Because as of right now, I'm not seeing any campaigns where you're actually spotlighting. I was like, you're kind of on a pedestal and you need to come down and, start creating campaigns that allow your members to see their transformations and stuff like that. So that's the general around connection. And then you get into conversion, and conversion is kind of like a marketing term. And I probably it's the one that my partner made me put in, because he goes, you're talking about all these C's and you never mention money. And I said, because community leaders do not have to sell, because if you're doing all of these C's in the fanatical community, method, then they're just going to buy from you when you have something to buy, because you're creating so much enormous value. Like me, with Octonation, I didn't even think to sell. I just, I told them, hey, we have, like, this past week, I said, we just launched a sticker set. And I had over 300 orders in one day. Because I provide so much enormous value on an ongoing basis, and my campaigns are entertaining, informative, and fun, that it's effortless when I go to sell something. I don't even think about it. I just present the opportunity that is, hey, we have this new opportunity, and everyone buys it. So, but I put it in conversion because, people want to know how to make money with their community. And so conversion is all about, how do you ethically convert people from what you're doing to an offer. So you can't do any slimy things like put countdown timers, or I don't believe in any of that stuff. A lot of the things that marketers do, I'm just like, they don't have communities. They have Facebook ads that are very transactional, and they don't really care about community. They're just looking for that sale. And I can't get behind that. I don't want to get into that, but
it's so refreshing to come across somebody else in the industry that works in the same way that I do.
I'm like, you don't need you don't need to do any of that. If you're truly providing value on an ongoing basis, there's no convincing people that there's a fear of missing out. Because if you go to your connection C, and you're providing opportunities for your community members to be seen, and you're creating these transformation campaigns that show the very real proof that you're having a profound impact on their life, when you go to present something, they're going to buy it. There's no thought about it. And
do you find, though, that some people come to you because conversion is the piece they think they need, and then it's an education process to bring them up to speed?
Some of them come to me and they just say, I just want to make more money with my community. And that's why I always say I work with purpose-driven entrepreneurs. And I said, that doesn't sound real purpose-driven. So what is the transformation that you're looking to make on these people's lives? Because I'm not hearing it through you just saying you want to make more sales. So I kind of go back I kind of push them back to the first C, and I'm just like, who and what? What are you doing for them? And why are you doing for them? What are your values? And sometimes I'm like, okay, the call's over. You're not somebody who I'm interested in working with, because you cannot, genuinely tell me, what's the reason behind doing this. And I was just like, if you just want to sit on a beach and you don't want to provide any true transformation in these people's lives, I'm not the person for you. So I just end the call. Then the last C is consistency. And how do you do this in a way that's sustainable? Community leaders are always burning themselves out. I burnt myself out. I can't tell you how many times I've just said, I don't want to do any of this anymore. I'm done. And it was only until I started being like, okay, I'm not done. I woke up the next morning and was like, okay, I'm not done. So how do I not feel like that again? How can I create this in a way that's sustainable? So that's really when I learned about how to delegate tasks to different team members. So, how do you develop moderators and admins? How do you make them aware of your core values and your clarity, like your marketing statements, to where they understand the vision, the mission, the community vision, the community mission, and they're on they're on the same path as you. Like they feel lit up. They look for opportunities for you. And the last C is really kind of how I map that out for the community leader and how I build the support system under them so that they don't say, I'm overwhelmed, which happens to new community leaders. But I'm like, okay, well, remember, we built out this support system. So, are you using it? They're like, well, no, I'm not. I'm like, okay, well, let's remember why they're there. Let's remember why they're there. They all want to help you. They're on payroll. So why don't we, look to them and offload some more of these things that you really don't need to be doing. So it's just, working with them in their corner and helping them, realize that, just bring them back. Here's your community vision. Here's your community mission. Here are all the comments that you're getting that are people that have said that you profoundly changed their life. And I kind of bring them back to a space of here's your why. And so that whole method has seemed to work really well for me. And so those of you who are listening, I hope you were writing all those C's down.
We'll have them in the show notes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, just go back to those C's. And typically the longest conversation that I have with people is on the first one. The community leaders tell me, I don't want to pigeonhole myself. I don't want to leave anybody out. And I said, don't think about people who you're leaving out. Think about the community that you're creating for people that are finally going to feel seen, appreciated, because you've